Ooh, it's spicy. Ooh, it's scorching. We got burns in somehow the 4th degree. Final Fantasy 14 Dawntrail. You have hot takes. I had to read them. I'm gonna react to them. Let's have some fun. And as always, the proper disclaimer that I asked for these hot takes. Yeah, I wanted them hot, fresh, off the presses. And remember, at the end of the day, it's just a video game. It ain't that big of a deal. It's all just for fun, so don't take it too seriously, okay? But I put up the call to arms for hot takes, and oh my god, you all delivered like you're an Amazon delivery driver. But let's put a cork in the pee bottles, and let's get into this. Hello, everybody. I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming. Enough preamble, let's deep dive into this. Now, I want to start the first one off with a bit of a fun one. This could honestly have worked in my upcoming video where I react to your fan theories, but my hot take by Uwina88, my hot take is Wuk Lamat is a primal with how everyone behaves around her, including the Warrior of Light, all instantly loving and worshipping her. Look, I think it's fair to say the reception to Wuk Lamat as a character overall has been rather heated. But I'm just saying, if they pulled this like a cat in the hat and they just ripped the band-aid off in the patches and this was the story going on, I'm just saying I'd be hooked. That'd be interesting. She would immediately go from a character that I couldn't care 2 cents about to a character that I'm like, okay, I need to find out what happens next with this. It would unironically be one of the biggest plot twists in this entire game, and you know what? I don't think just by nature of being a plot twist makes something good, but this one, I would really like to see what they do with it. The brave 9971 brings to the table, Brute Bomber got more characterization in the 10-minute fight you fight him in than Zeralja in like 10 hours of MSQ. I think it's a little bit unfair to say Zeralja didn't have any characterization or didn't have a lot. I think he had a decent amount. The problem is Final Fantasy XIV being known for its villains and having interesting villains that are either relatable, you can understand where they're coming from, or just evil for evil's sake. And you know what? I love that kind of villain. Xenos, I love that kind of villain. When it comes to Zeralja, though, he doesn't really leave an impact. We kind of go back to the whole main issue I have with Dawntrail, telling not showing, and for a villain especially that can really undercut a lot of stakes you're trying to build here. And Zeralja just looks like a bootleg version of an elite from Halo. And his big active villainy with killing... By the way, spoiler alert for this video. Just want to slide that one in before I forget. His big, like, mock of villainy in the game is killing Galulja. And in that scene, I'm not so much upset by Zeralja killing him and being like, oh, how could you kill your father? I'm more upset at everyone else for just standing there, like, sucking on their thumb, or, like, edging themselves, being like, no, he's not gonna revive himself, go into a berserker rage, and kill his own father, is he? We should just stay back and do absolutely nothing and watch it happen. In 4K! But when it comes to Brood Bomber, the whole Arcadian storyline leans into those elements of being a wrestling match, like WWE, like Attitude Era, just leans into it. And during the fight, what they do a lot of the time that they don't do, funnily enough, in a lot of the main story, they use storytelling in the fight to where Brood Bomber's main phase transition is him roiding up. The ref coming in, disqualifying him, but Brood Bomber knocks him aside. His enrage, in Savage, is jumping off the top rope. The entire fight and the Arcadian on the whole, which we'll get to later on in this video, by the way, just oozes charm and personality, and it's a giant love letter to wrestling. And the writing feels far more up to par when it comes to characterization and dialogue and just writing overall. And the voice acting in these scenes in the Arcadian, even during the raid fights, are so, like, chock full of personality and character. It's a story that's firing in all cylinders, and when you have a story that can do that, it can make scenes, even ones that are short in the grand scheme of things, like the Arcadian, and especially with things like Brood Bomber, it makes them feel far more impactful. Just because a character has more screen time does not necessarily mean they're more impactful or necessarily a better character. I think when it came to the Arcadian, a lot more was done in less time, so you know what? I kind of agree with this hot take. Lawrence Lopez 9839 comes up to bat absolutely swinging. This just just a lot of things that are too similar to Endwalker, but not as good. Valigamonda's whole plot was similar to Zodiac in that they were sealed, is expected to be a huge threat, gets free, and dies early into the expansion. Only Zodiac had a few expansions to build up. Sphene in the last area was too similar to a certain emo bold. I almost read that as bold. Oh my god, I got brain rot from my chat. To a certain emo bird girl, and last expansion's last area. And you know what? I didn't even clock that Valigamonda part, but it's like a good point. There was another comment that I don't know made into the video that someone said about them getting a bit too reliant on having a mid-expansion big plot twist. And when it comes to Valigamonda, again, going back to what I was talking about before and have been talking about for weeks, telling not showing, we see the after effects of Valigamonda. We don't really get to see much with Valigamonda on screen, and really the only time we do is either when they're like frozen in ice or when we like cue into the fight itself. Sure, we see some, like, burned claw marks in the countryside and some burnt, like, locations, but I think if we had some scenes where we saw the Yakoi actually trying to fend off Valigamonda and getting absolutely worked up on, and we saw Valigamonda be this big threat for more than, like, half a scene on screen, I think that would really have worked. Especially if what they had done was, for the entire story up to now, like, introduce ramifications of Valigamonda's wrath from years gone by. With, like, the duck people or even the bird people, like, say, hey, we used to be able to do this thing, but because of Valigamonda, we had to, like, adjust strategy, or maybe we introduced a new festival or something to counteract it, stuff like that. More systemic ramifications for Valigamonda. Make Valigamonda this, like, overarching thread. Give us more cutscenes showing Valigamonda's past. Maybe even a playable section where we get the players Gulul Jaja and his party pack when fighting off Valigamonda, and we see him trapping in an ice. Just stuff like that where we see, not just tell. And yeah, I've talked about before how I think Living Memory is kind of a worse version of Ultima Thule, but in other ways I do really like it because there's a more of a sense of finality and permanence when it came to the sacrifices we were making. I'm using sacrifices in quotations there, by shutting off Living Memory. Whereas for all of Ultima Thule, I figured all the signs were going to come back because there's actually no shot they're going to kill them all off in one scene. But I like what they did with that scene in Ultima Thule. I prefer Ultima Thule. I think it's better visually, storytelling-wise. So acts as a better sense of conclusion and all that. But while I think Living Memory is like a lesser version of Ultima Thule in a lot of ways, I still like it. Mark Messi 9020 brings in hot take, I love Wuk Lamat. She reminds me of my Malinois. I'm going to just assume I pronounced that correctly. Even when the story got boring, I was bored with my doggo together. We both suffered. The emote small as hell on my screen. I imagine that's a smiley face. One of the biggest elements of storytelling is personal perception. Because at the end of the day, there's no real sense of objectivity or when it comes to storytelling. Because even a story that I'm like, I could go on hours and hours and hours of rants about why this story is bad, why characters are bad, etc, etc, etc. I'm not even talking about Dawntrail here, but like, even this, for this imaginary story that I could go on and on about being bad, Halo 5, there's gonna be some people out there that love it, because our reaction to storytelling is so deeply rooted in personal experience and how we can personally relate to something, and you can't really take that into account. While I personally do not like the character of Wuk Lamat, there's gonna be plenty of other people out there that, for whatever reason, they do like it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's honestly one of the great elements of storytelling, is that it can all affect us in different ways and resonate with us in different ways. It's an important thing to keep in mind, in my opinion, when it comes to critiquing and analyzing a story. Because I think there's some elements that we can, like, break down to, in terms of generally this means it's going to be better or worse, depending on how you execute it, like largely showing, not telling. But even a story that entirely deals in telling, not showing, can resonate hard if the subject matter hits for you, or whatever. There's some people that are gonna like a story simply because of the music that's told. That's the way, that's their emotional in for it. Or when it comes to, say, fight design, that's their emotional in. That's how they resonate with a scene, or whatever. Maybe a specific character, or just something extremely subtle, like visualization, or the aesthetics, or whatnot. All these different elements have different weight in terms of their overall importance to your enjoyment for different people, and that's fine. Because that's the cool thing about storytelling as a medium. That's the cool thing about video games, is that there's so many different elements that goes into making a video game a video game. You can't really just say one element's better than the other because the weight changes and varies on person to person. I think that's really cool. The man behind the screen, which not gonna lie sounds like a Hollywood director's memoirs, brings to the table, okay, here's my hot take then. The Rite of Succession story should never have happened. As a premise, it's too complex for the plot-light story they wanted to present in the first half. My expectation when we did our first adventure with Wuk Lamat back in Endwalker was that we were going to get a story that drew its inspiration from classic pulp action adventure fiction. I'm talking about things like Conan, Solomon Kane, Fafhrd, I don't know, and the Grey Mouse, Tarzan, the Jungle Book, and so on. Stories which were lighter on plot, but chock full of adventure, action, and fun. That vibe was put into place with the little adventures we take with Wuk Lamat on the Isle of Ham. Sorry, just imagining an island full of ham and bacon puts a dang near tear to my eye. And it would have been the perfect sort of thing to draw inspiration from for a lighter story like what they wanted to tell. It's the sort of thing they try to do with the first half of Shaloni, and while it has its issues, that portion of the MSQ was considerably more fun than exploring the shallow complexities of the Rite of Succession. And in interest of time, I'll stop reading it there, but I'll leave it on screen if you want to keep reading. But I kind of agree. I think Dawntrail failed in one critical element that it was trying to actively aim for, and that was being these like summertime adventure. And the moment I realized, at least to me, that it failed in doing this was when I unlocked the expert mode dungeons and did the one in Shaloni that ends up with the Great Serpent. I'm like, this is a better sense of adventure. This makes me feel like Indiana Jones, where you have this beautiful vista and I'm going there discovering all this really cool stuff, delving into ruins and all that, learning about this like ancient culture. Like this dungeon is doing that idea better than the MSQ did for me. And I think the only time in the MSQ where I kind of got that was in the Mamook dungeon, where we go down to the place where they threw all the children's bodies, which was really cool, but to me, I didn't get that sense of adventure because it was tied into the Rite of Succession. And for me, at least, I think that whole first half would have been better if you completely remove all the trials and you just have this sole idea being, hey, go out and find the City of Gold. The first one to find it becomes the new Dawn Servant. Just have that overarching vague goal and have us, in order to do so, go around to these various locations trying to put pieces together, exploring ruins and stuff, just desperately trying to find any fragment of knowledge or wisdom that may point us in the right direction. And by doing so and going to these locations, we learn about these people in a far more natural setting than what ended up feeling like a checklist to-do list of things to do. Don't have like the main goal of an area be to make some tacos. Have it be that we go there to find the City of Gold. Like this is one of the last places this could be. We've had a few hints up to now that point us in this general direction. But while exploring this region, we discover this big tension between the lizard people and the cat people. And through our adventures hanging out with them, we learn about Jabruk Pibil, if you really want to go that route. And the lizard people are weirdly like secretive and kind of resentful of us, and we don't know why. And then we learn about that whole storyline with the blessed siblings and all that. Honestly, put Shaloni earlier in the story that we go to. Really play up in this idea that when the Yakhoi went north, they got sick. Have us go to Shaloni, try and figure out reasons for why that may have happened. Have us do that one expert dungeon there. Have that dungeon like point us to the Golden City. Stuff like that. Lean into the sense of adventure. Because I don't think the Rite of Succession nailed that at all. I think it tried to do that with the first dungeon as well, with us going down pretty much the Amazon River on a raft. And I like the dungeons, don't get me wrong, but because they're all tied into this overarching idea that we have to just get a bunch of starburst to put into some like stone tablets, it completely undercuts this feeling of natural adventure, which is what I think they were trying to go for. And this whole like summer vacation feel, I just never got that. If it was far more open-ended with this singular vague goal of find the Golden City, I think you could have these scenes and have these events feel more adventurous and fulfilling to this sense of wanderlust, while having the development for Tural on the whole feel more natural and earned. That's just my 2 cents though. Stake Driven comes in, and honestly same, with the take that Yana and Honeybee Lovely should join the main cast. Yana might have relatives on the source, and Honey clearly craves adventure. Again, I kind of agree, but the reason I agree is because for the reasons we were just talking about, and I've talked about for a couple of weeks now in regards as to why the story of Dawntrail didn't really hit for me all that much. Telling not showing, and the characters feeling too cardboard cutouty, like too stereotypy, too tropey. But when we come to the Arcadian, all of a sudden, they don't really do that, and the characters, well, they lean into the WWE elements of it, and they're fun, and they're intriguing. They're big balls of energy and personality and characterization. And I think it's because of that where I'm like, okay, bring these characters into the main story, because I wouldn't be missing the Scions nearly as much as I am here if the new characters that were introduced were far more enjoyable. Because I didn't miss the Scions at all when it came to the Arcadian, because the characters in the Arcadian story, to me, were far more than sufficient and were fun and enjoyable. All of those raids had stories to tell, even in the fight, and like their personality came through everywhere. And when it comes to like the characters of like Yana and the fourth fight and the little sister and how it like relates to Solution 9 on the whole, we kind of go back to what I was just talking about in the last hard take with a vague goal being better for the sense of adventure here. We just came here to figure out what happened or what was going on with the Arcadian, like on a whim, or possibly even the fight in it. And now we have this entire storyline about us trying to liberate these like trapped souls that are being used in gladiatorial combat, because our sense of ethics fundamentally differs from this culture here. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, I think this works for world building and characterization and building up a new cast of characters that we can come to learn about and care about, which is what you're going to have to do if you're going to try and do another 10-year-long story. You need new characters that aren't just the Scions, and you need to have new companions that you do care about, and it's writing styles like in the Arcadian that I think will lead us there. And in a similar vein to that, we have Randy Gaming 6776 talking about, I think Sphene was actually pretty cool to include, just ruined by Wuk Lamat. The idea that Sphene would turn to the worst people imaginable just to save her people actually makes sense when you consider how her civilization survives. They showed us that her people adored her and vice versa. Oda's dying in the story, and the dungeon is what sealed it for me. Unfortunately, instead of trying to relate to us, it's to Wuk Lamat. And by that point of the story, I'm sick and tired of Wuk Lamat. I hated her so bad that when she jumps in mid-fight to steal our win, I stopped pressing any buttons mid-fight to process it for a good few seconds. And like, this is what I'm alluding to. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to when you're going to deal with an entire new narrative arc. It's so important to nail world building and to nail characterization, because like stuff that can feel extremely subtle when you talk about it, like Sphene trying to act as the foil to Wuk Lamat, but because Wuk Lamat as a character is largely compromised in terms of enjoyability for a lot of people, myself included, it brings Sphene down really at no fault of her own, just because she's meant to work off of Wuk Lamat. But her story, in my opinion, would also work off of us, where we do so much over the course of Final Fantasy XIV, especially in, like, say, the Dark Knight story, that delves more so into, like, the inner trauma that the Warrior of Light has throughout their adventures that's not really ever addressed in the MSQ, but it is there. How we are willing to give so much of ourselves time and time and time again to defend this star, to defend its people, to defend people that are even at times going against us. That is a story and a dynamic that could really work against Sphene, because Sphene does similar stuff, even if her people doesn't realize it, to protect them as a leader instead of a hero like us. And yeah, it's supposed to work off of Wuk Lamat, but I think if you make Wuk Lamat a better character, a more enjoyable character on screen, then Sphene would be a better character by virtue of a foil being a better character. Because especially when you look back at a lot of these scenes, especially in Alexandria, at like a second glance over, you can see the places where they're like, we are actively trying to draw a comparison to something Wuk Lamat learned in the Rite of Succession. And I didn't pick up on it my first time through, because I don't think it's that well developed or that well executed. Like that scene with Kryla and her parents in living memory and like bonding over food and ice cream, like that's a parallel to Jabruk Pibil back in Yoctel. And there's like so many moments where they try and do stuff like this, like the farming scenes in Alexandria in like Heritage Lost or Found, whatever the hell the zone's called. Look at that scene and then look back to like the Reed stuff with the bird people back in Kozamauka. Like they are trying to draw parallels here, and I don't think it works all that well because of stuff we've talked about in this video, telling not showing, the Rite of Succession being too fetch questy, and it can make a scene where Wuk Lamat jumps in to interfere with a fight with Sphene, which, when you look at it plot point-wise, makes sense. Like, this is a very common thing they do, where you had all the Scions and everybody, like, trying to spirit bomb energy guide to us during the fight against the Endsinger, or Thancred and the Scions coming in during a fight with Hades. This is something they love to do ever since Shadowbringers, but because the character of Wuk Lamat gets compromised very early on, for a lot of people in terms of their enjoyability with that character, it makes that moment, which makes sense plot-wise, it makes it feel like a slap in the face to a lot of people. Now, I didn't personally mind it because I thought the fight itself was so fun and legit one of the best trials they ever made for a normal mode, whereas, like, that scene happened, I immediately just, like, didn't care because I had so much fun with the fight. I was just focusing on the mechanics, focusing on the fight, focusing on the visuals and all that, focusing on the music being awesome. But for a lot of other people, because of the storytelling techniques that were kind of poorly executed, in my opinion, up to this point, that scene massively undercuts how cool of a finale fight that could have been for a lot of people. And again, I don't necessarily agree with that element to it, but overall, I understand it. This is going to be a fun one. U2Sim says, hot take, flashing the Scions and then Meteor being the warrior of light in all the cutscenes and like the cinematics and all that, himself at the end of the final gameplay trailer before release was talking about sacrifice, borders on false advertisement. I wouldn't call it false advertisement because I understand what they're trying to do with that scene, where Sphene time and time again sacrifices so much for people and is willing to sacrifice other people to fuel the endless and all that. She's like trying to like spit it back at us, like if we were in her position and we had an opportunity to save the Scions and everyone else that we cared about, but we had to do some kind of evil to other people, would we be willing to do that? I understand what they're going for there. I don't think they leaned into that as much as they could have or should have. And I think the reason they didn't is because they didn't want to put all the Scions at danger of dying again right after Shadowbringers and Endwalker. Like, they didn't want to do it again because we would all just be collectively like, okay, we've seen this, like, this show before. We know nothing's going to come from it. We know there's going to be no real stakes when we think about it here. Let's just get the show on the road. And there's also another perspective to have here where we go around living memory, learning about these people, Kryl's parents, Aaronville's mother, etc., etc., etc. We have the gondola ride with Grahatia. We have these scenes where, like, we are supposed to care about the Endless, and, like, this is supposed to be a really hard decision for us, but we are able to make the choice that Sphene never could, and that is turning them off. So I wouldn't call it false advertisement. I wouldn't say that the subject matter that is, like, covered or alluded to there doesn't happen. But yeah, it definitely wasn't executed the way I thought it would, which was put us in the position Sphene was in, to where we have to make some grand sacrifice to protect the ones we care and love. And we just don't ever really have a scene like that. I don't think that necessarily makes Dawntrail bad, or that if we had that scene, it would make Dawntrail good. I think Dawntrail had other larger, more systemic issues than this, but I can kind of understand being disappointed by this one element. Okay, this is one that could honestly be made into an entire video. The Mask of Black says, the old heads, quotations, are only 30 to 40, talking about the player base. It'll be 20 to 40 years before most of the old heads die off. Not everything needs to be made for Gen Z, who don't even really game in the field of MMORPGs. They play things like Minecraft and Fortnite, which is fine as well. Different markets for different interests is okay. After all, if I wanted to sell golf clubs, I don't go to a football stadium. It's called target audiences. And this is alluding to a point I bring up occasionally, and others have as well, that Dawntrail feels as if it's targeting a younger audience. And I'm not going to get too deep into it here because I'm like, I really, to do this point justice, could make a full video on it, and I'm going to. But I think targeting a young audience when it comes to a game isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think for 14 specifically, when you have this singular game that's going on for 10 years, a lot of your audience are going to be people that have been playing for years, and you kind of have to be cognizant of that your player base on the whole is tending to, like, age alongside the game. And when you go from story after story after story after story in Final Fantasy XIV that's really mature, nuanced, deals with complex and mature themes and subject matters in a very articulate and interesting and nuanced way, and then you, like, slap him in the face with this story that's really dumbed down in terms of its theme and messaging, and like force feeds you its theme over and over and over again, that largely lacks subtlety and nuance, that's going to create a lot of friction because you have cultivated an audience of players that, for the most part, aren't after that. They are after a more nuanced and subtle story with more mature writing. That doesn't mean you can't have comedic relief or more lighthearted themes and messaging, but it matters how you convey that. Like, I can write a really dark story, which is like blood, guts, gore. Yeah, we hate each other. Yeah, bad things happen to good people. It can be really upfront and in your face, right? And you can have elements of that, and that can work. Or you can also have a story that's really upfront and in your face, where it's like, the power of friendship and cooperation. Hell yeah, brother. Thumbs up, handshake into the camera. That's a scene in 14 Dawntrail, by the way. But it's about the depth of the writing. It's about the style of the writing, how you convey this. Does it feel natural? Does it feel earned? Does it feel inspired? Or does it feel slapdash? Does it feel boring and uninteresting? And in a lot of ways, when it came to Dawntrail, it felt as if not only was it targeting a younger demographic, but also was trying to target like people with worse reading comprehension, if that makes sense, or worse media literacy. And that's just by nature of them forcefully saying the theme repeatedly over and over and over again without any nuance or without any subtlety. Like, it's really in your face, and I think that acts as a detriment. Again, this is a video like in the making I could easily do. And for our final hot take, we have Steven Alvarez, 2924, coming up to bat with, oddly enough, Dawntrail wouldn't have been the first time the Scions were written out. Heavensward MSQ was done 90% without Scions, mostly just Alphino. Y'shtola was just used to be introduced to a master, then essentially dropped from the story. My hot take is that Dawntrail would have been a far superior story if all 4 claimants of the throne were forced to travel together instead of separately. Even with all the same story beats, just seeing each claimant point of view for each trail and the answers would be far more interesting. This one I'm kind of here or there on. One of the biggest issues that I think Dawntrail had was characterization, as I've mentioned numerous times throughout this video, and developing a new cast of characters. So you would obviously have to adjust the rules of the rite of succession, because right now it's first come, first serve, like get to the City of Gold, get all the starbursts, and you're good to go. You would have to change that up, but if you had more scenes at least, and far more time with all 4 of these characters instead of it being broken up as much as it is, it would build up all their dynamics with one another. It would give you more opportunity to flesh out the interpersonal dynamics between the 4, develop them all as characters, and make us care more about them, instead of having a large amount of screen time be dedicated to Scions at points in time that aren't developing them as characters, but they're trying desperately to develop Wuk Lamat or Kona as characters, and I just don't think it works. It makes the Scions just kind of feel like they're cardboard cutouts with the Scions names there. I think it's especially true for Alize and Alphino throughout the rite of succession and throughout most of Dawntrail. And we have seen stories in 14 work without the Scions of the 7th Dawn, Heavensward being a great example of that, where you can take 1 or 2 like Alphino and really drive that one home, but also develop a bunch of other characters. Heck, one of my favorite characters in all of Final Fantasy XIV is Gosetsu, who is an excellent example of a character you can introduce in a story, give a lot of spotlight and like development to, without the need of just having Scions there all the time. And with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. Whew! There's a lot of hot takes we went through. But as always, please leave a comment down below with your own hot take in regards to Final Fantasy XIV or Dawntrail on the whole. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your hot takes, so that I may react to them in a future video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you like this video and you want to see more content. I would greatly appreciate that. And hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream on this YouTube channel in the future. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!